There's a lot of passion here, for the game of basketball, and I've been coming since '98 now, and because of that, I've built quite a following here. So, it's always fun to come back. Growing up overseas, the way I grew up, you kind of grow up with the understanding of adapting to different cultures and being curious about different cultures, the history, philosophy, foods. So when I first came out to China, it wasn't something where I was apprehensive to learn or to try new things. I was excited to, because that's how I've always grown up. So I think, me having that openness and curiosity about their culture, I think endeared me to them in some respects. When you grow up in Europe, man, you're accustomed to speaking 3, 4, 5 languages, because everything's relatively close. So, you may be in Italy on a Monday, maybe in France on a Tuesday, in Germany on a third, it's just, even though they're really close to each other, culturally they're very, very different, right? So it's understanding how to adapt to those different cultures, not just adapt, but embrace the differences between the cultures. We tend to look at the game. When I was growing up in Italy not that long ago. I'm old, I'm not that old. And back then, games were still on tape delay. The game wasn't as global. Kids weren't playing basketball. 90% of the kids were in the street playing soccer, not basketball. And now to come overseas and to see so many different basketball courts every other block, to see kids wearing NBA jerseys, to see a kid in China dreaming about being an NBA player. These were things that were unheard of in '98, '97. So it's remarkable how fast the game has come. One of the big shifts here as well, as I've seen, is, when I first came out here, children were very structured. And as I started coming back more and more, I started working on, okay, these are the basic fundamentals of the game. Now, how do I teach them imagination? How do I teach them to rely on instincts and find individualism within, this structure? And that's a bigger cultural question, right? That's how the game, any game, has more relevance and significance to life and culture itself. For countries like France and Australia and Spain and Argentina, basketball has been there since the Dream Team in '92. That was their tipping point. And I think here, the Olympics certainly did it in '08. The World Cup here, I think this year is a little different, especially with China's performance. Now it's like, okay, wait, no. We need to be one of these best teams in the world. We have to flip that switch. How do we do it? And I think it becomes something that's makes them more driven to succeed for this country. We want to continue to teach. We want to continue to put our young players, our young athletes in positions to be successful, and doing our best to try to make that happen. It's a lot of innovation. I think what I'm starting to see now, because the sport has become truly global, it's not just the similarities in the style of play now with international basketball and and NBA basketball, but it's also the innovation side, where you have different therapists and doctors and trainers sharing information across the board about how to make athletes stronger, how to take care of their bodies. What research have you found over here in Germany? Let's compare that to the research that we've discovered here in France and what we're doing in the United States. So it's a sharing of information to help athletes be better. Make sure everybody's communicating, make sure we're continuing to push, make sure athletes stay locked in the fact that you always have to keep thinking forward and thinking ahead, right? Versus just saying, okay, this is what I do now and assuming this is the best thing for me 5 years from now. You kind of have to have your ear to innovation and understand what's the newest, the latest. Not that you go towards that, but it's important to know that information so you can make educated decisions. Just the beauty of watching them learn, man, and trying to spark curiosity in them so that then they can the light switch goes off for them, but it's something that it turns on, but it's something that they turn on themselves. I started writing probably my sophomore year in high school, off and on. but I've always loved stories. I always loved movies. Movies more so than books. I wasn't much of a reader. I couldn't really find books that I would gravitate to, which is why I create sports fantasy books now. Because if there were sports fantasy books when I was growing up, I would have read them. You know, but that story bug's always been there. You know, I just kind of think about why the story needs to exist in the world. Why is it important? You know, is it something that I wish I had when I was a kid? I would always start with something very personal, a powerful message. And then from there, you start trying to unpack the character who's going to be going through it. And then the opposite of the main character. And generally, like, you start with the main character and then you come up with the antagonist to it. And a lot of times you wind up flipping those and the antagonist becomes the hero and the hero becomes the antagonist. It's kind of weird how it works. And then you just progress through who these characters are, you know, where their backgrounds, why they are the way that they are, which then leads you to their parents, and then you got to unpack that story, you know. And so one question leads to the next, and you just wind up writing pages and pages and pages and pages and pages and pages of notes and backstory, things that won't ever pop up in the book, but it's very important to know. Content that's been cared for. And I think that's the thing that's missing nowadays in this era of clickbait, where journalistic integrity or responsibility doesn't exist anymore. Doesn't have to exist anymore. You can just say what you want to say without any consequences or repercussions to it, without fact-checking anything. It's very dangerous. And so what we want to do is create stories that have been cared for. You know, animation that's been worked and reworked and worked and reworked, and scripts that have been worked and reworked, and focusing on the lighting of each single shot and the performances of each character. These things need to be really obsessed over, because I think that's what's missing in the world right now. Yeah, I think it's a shift. It's a cultural shift. I mean, you know, Michael started the shift with his endorsement deal with Nike, and you know what he's been able to parlay that into, and endorsement income and things of that nature. And now that model has shifted, so athletes, you know, taking a deeper look at ownership and building their own companies from the ground up. And it's been a huge shift, but it's been awesome to see. It makes me nervous a little bit. It's because equity is such a word that's kind of been thrown around a lot, but you got to be careful with that stuff. You got to be careful. You got to make sure you vet things thoroughly. You got to make sure you're patient. And you know, it makes me nervous a little bit. Like, when people hear my story with body armor, it made me nervous. I didn't want athletes jumping into the next deal because they saw my success and think it was something that was easy or something, whatever the case may be. You gotta be really, really careful. It's still an exciting time. Opportunity still presents itself that are great, but you just gotta measure it correctly. Balancing you know, the craft, the game of basketball, which is the most important thing for you right now, and doing that, and you know, your family, and but then also keeping an eye on what you want to do when you retire, because it's hard to, you know, the year that you retire, then say, okay, I want to do that. You know, that time is kind of behind the 8 ball a little bit, and you'll have this kind of year or 2 years of drifting post-retirement, which is not healthy. So I encourage them to really focus, start trying different things while they're playing, and see what thing they gravitate to the most, because if you can find the thing that you love to do as much as you love playing basketball, then you're set. Kind of surreal. Because it seemed like yesterday to me when I first picked up a ball, you know, and I like slept with my first leather basketball, you know, like it seems surreal that here I am now looking at the hall. But to be a part of that history, truly be a part of that history, and the great players that have played this game on a global level would mean the world to me.